let's talk about the reason you're in Kenya this very moment. And it's this Africa Forward Summit, co-hosted by Kenya and France. For you and for Botswana, what does this mean for you?
Well, Botswana is reaching out to other African countries and reaching out to the world. Firstly, under the aegis of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we need to reach out to each other. We need to develop corridors of trade. We need to encourage flows of trade and investment amongst ourselves as African countries. Mm-hmm. And we recognize that the current reality is that there's very low intra-Africa trade. And we need to address this challenge. And we need to do it through engagement, through collaboration, through partnerships, and through a robust and aggressive improvement of our facilities so that we are interconnected and we can trade more freely and efficiently.
Right. One wonders, and these are questions that many people ask about this Africa plus one, so the whole of Africa plus one global power, a huge country out there. Does it need to take that, in this case France, to have that conversation about Africa free trade area, which has been around for a while, and perhaps some feel these borders can still open when you do not have that involvement at that level?
Well, the African countries must, amongst themselves, address their own challenges. Some of them legacies of the colonial period. Even the way the infrastructure is laid out, it was never to connect African countries. It was to evacuate raw material from Africa. So any routes lead to ports out of Africa. So we need now increasingly to connect amongst ourselves. If you looked at air transportation in Africa, in certain instances, if you take, if you want to move from Luanda in Angola, for instance, to Maputo in Mozambique, you have to travel all the way to Addis mm-hmm. in order to come back. Yeah. And it takes several hours, sometimes even days, when you could do a 1-hour flight. So we need to address some of these so that our people are more interconnected, and there's a free and efficient flow of goods and services within Africa. And so that doesn't need any external influence or prodding. It is Africa that must deal with it, and the African Union, and the regional trade blocs, SADC, COMESA, and the East African Community. So we need to strengthen these so that they can collaborate, and then we will achieve this. Mm-hmm. So Africa Plus is basically a bonus. Africa must, before it coexists, Africa must exist. Okay. And Africa exists by strengthening the binds and bonds that keep us together and that define us as the continent of Africa. That's critical. Okay.
So for your country then, specifically in this summit, are you coming in with a mindset to sign some deals, some trade agreements with perhaps France?
Well, we're looking for agreements, for partnerships with companies, the private sector. The private sector is involved in the main in finding solutions. So they identify problems, they find solutions to these problems, they develop these solutions, they protect their intellectual property in these solutions. And so if we have these problems that require the solutions that they have, we have to engage with them, mm-hmm. engage with a view to ensuring that they internalize their intellectual property they deploy in our countries, in Africa, and that we are then able to address the pressing problems from within and get our people involved. And in the process, there must also be a skills transfer. And we will also engage if there's any need to invest in research alongside the private sector. We will do so in order to have these durable solutions to problems that we face on a daily basis.
Okay, so let's talk about, because we've been actually reading some reports that France's nuclear energy group, Orano, is looking to sign some deals and invest in Botswana for uranium. Could you tell us if that's one of the agreements that you're looking at, and how far that project is?
Well, the way things work is that we've been issuing, and this has been going on for years, decades now, prospecting and mining licenses to companies, mining houses from wherever they came, if they were interested in investing and they were willing to operate within the laws. So this French company, Orano, has actually been given, it's not something that starts now, they already hold prospecting licenses. And we anticipate that they will do the drilling, the prospecting, establish the different quantities of deposit of uranium, and then they will get to the next stage of extraction, and extraction for a number of reasons and all to address a number of challenges. The first is power. With uranium, we can have modular nuclear reactors that generate power. The cleanest and the cheapest form of energy is exactly that. So we're looking to have that. That will re-energize, catalyze our economy, because we can then establish hyperscale data centers within Botswana. We can then become more than energy sufficient. We become a net exporter of power to the neighboring countries where there's a huge deficit. So these collaborations, partnerships with Orano or any other foreign investment entity that would like to operate in Botswana are most welcome.
Yeah.
And so we are looking to strengthen, we are looking to speed up the process so that they can get to extraction, we can then get to developing nuclear reactors, generate power, have it cheap, spread it, because the coverage now in Botswana is about 76%. So there's a sizable part of the population that is still not covered. So we want to cover the whole country, and everybody must have access.
And do you have some timelines for that, for this nuclear project?
Well, we're looking to have everything up and running within the next 1.5 years. Really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about Africa-France relationships. What do you make of that relationship at the moment? Because it's been criticized by some. Some may see that even this summit is probably a diplomatic attempt by France to start looking east of Africa, southern of Africa.
Well, here's how things work in the real world. Every country, every power looks out for its own interests. And every African country must also understand this reality. And African countries must look out for their own interests, and collectively as the continent, we must look out for the interests of the continent. Mm-hmm. And so when we step out to engage with any country, any power, we must do so from the vantage point of understanding what our strategic imperatives are. And when we get to the negotiating table, we must pursue vigorously these initiatives. What has tended to happen in the past is that the previous leaders on the African continent have cut deals that are not so beneficial to their countries and to the continent. That was a failure of leadership, a monumental failure. So we need a breed of leaders now that understand the interests and are able to pursue these interests vigorously and come out of any negotiation, any engagement with deals that benefit the countries, that benefit the continent, and that then are able to sustain these links and affinities among the African countries themselves. So this is what we need to do. Rather than lament what others have exacted from Africa with the complicity of Africans, we need now to understand what it is that we also must exact from the world. What do we want the world to perceive us as?
And yet this relationship with France hasn't done so well in recent years, specifically if we look at the Sahel countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. What do you think of that?
Well, exactly the point I've made. If you allow others to come in and you don't yourself protect your interests and the interests of your people, a large chunk of the blame must fall on you. And now there has emerged in the Sahel region a new breed of leaders that have prioritized the interests of their countries and of their region and ultimately of Africa. And so they've made demands. They've reconfigured the landscape. And it is something that is commendable. And so whoever wants to deal, France can deal with the Sahel region, but on terms that are different from the previous ones. So there's no preclusion There's no stopping any country from trading with. What now must obtain is we trade on fair and equitable terms. That must benefit the countries in Africa. And the Sahel region has taken that stance, and it's critical.
For France at this moment, what do you think would be that strategic advantage for Africa that you're trying to describe?
If you take the BOTSWANA, the collaboration in the uranium space, it's not about extracting uranium in the raw and taking it and fixing the prices yourselves elsewhere. This is about the country from which the uranium is produced playing a leading role in the process of extraction, in any beneficiation, and in the trade in the commodity. And so this is exactly what must happen. Right. So people must come, foreign investors must come, we encourage them to come, but they will come on our terms, not on terms determined by themselves and to the exclusion of the producer countries. This is a very simple proposition, and it's a fair and equitable proposition even in the world of commerce.
So tell me where you see African countries in terms of that strategic positioning, especially with global powers like China and the US. This very week there'll be a big meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping in China, and it comes at a time when China has just granted African countries a huge trade deal for, zero tariff for most of their exports. Do you feel that African countries are finally sort of cracking the code to demonstrate that value that you described earlier?
Well, yes, I think there's a unique opportunity for Africa, for African countries. We do not want a repeat of the 1884 Berlin Conference where foreign powers met for the apportionment of Africa amongst themselves. We want a situation where those who come as equal partners and respectfully to assist their economies, of course, but to also appreciate that the African economies must also grow, and the Africans, for their part, must engage with Xi Jinping, engage with President Trump, with an understanding of what their strategic interests are, and go to the table to ensure that they get a fair deal, a fair and equitable deal that will work for their people and generate the economic growth that is required to power the lives and livelihoods of their people. So a meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping might be good for the world, in fact, if they realize that whatever little trade wars that they engage in become exogenous shocks for economies of other countries, and so they must actually act with extreme circumspection when it comes to how they handle their own affairs as world powers. But it's encouraging that some of the misunderstandings result in some benefit. If the Americans impose tariffs, China says no, zero. We'll remove the tariffs. This will now cause the Americans to rethink and say, we may lose a whole handle on power here, or on whatever dominance or coming an imperial power, because imperial hubris as well can be extremely dangerous. So I think the dynamics are working out very well, and Africa must position itself to push its own interests.